Lieutenant David Walsh wiped the sweat from his brow as his patrol vehicle bumped along the dusty Mojave Desert Road. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning the military-grade Humvee into an oven despite its struggling air conditioning. His team had been dispatched to investigate an unusual energy signature detected by nearby Edwards Air Force Base's sensors. "Sir, we're approaching the coordinates," Sergeant Rachel Torres announced from the driver's seat, her eyes fixed on the GPS display. "Quarter-mile ahead." David adjusted his tactical vest and checked his rifle out of habit. After 8 years in the Air Force Security Forces, routine had become second nature. But something about this mission felt different. The energy signature didn't match any known aircraft or weapons systems, and the brass had been unusually tight-lipped about the whole operation. The Humvee crested a small rise, and David's breath caught in his throat. There, in a shallow depression between two sand dunes, lay what could only be described as a crash site. But instead of twisted metal and burning wreckage, they found a perfectly smooth, oval depression in the sand, its edges crystallized into glass. "Holy shit," whispered Corporal Michael Thompson from the back seat. "That's no drone crash." David keyed his radio. "Base, this is Echo 7. We've located the site. No visible wreckage, but..." He trailed off as movement caught his eye. At the center of the depression lay a figure. "Hold position and await backup, Echo 7, came the immediate response. "Do not approach or make contact." But David was already moving. The figure looked humanoid, and if someone was hurt, waiting wasn't an option. He slid down the sandy slope, ignoring Torres's protests. As he approached, details became clearer. The figure was feminine, wearing what appeared to be a sleek, silvery suit that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Her skin was pale lavender, with delicate, iridescent patterns that might have been tattoos or natural markings. She wasn't breathing. David knelt beside her, protocols forgotten. Her skin was cool to the touch despite the desert heat. The moment his fingers contacted her wrist to check for a pulse, a jolt of electricity shot through his arm. The alien woman's eyes snapped open, solid silver orbs without pupils or iris. She gasped, drawing in a deep breath as color flooded back into her skin. Her hand grasped David's wrist with surprising strength. When she spoke, her voice had an ethereal, musical quality that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his mind. Connection established. Neural synchronization complete. Her head tilted as she studied him. You're different from the others. They couldn't hear me." David became aware of his team surrounding them, weapons drawn. "Stand down," he ordered, never breaking eye contact with the alien woman. "I'm Lieutenant David Walsh, United States Air Force. Are you hurt?" "I am Kreth, Scout Observer of the Stellar Confluence." She sat up smoothly, still maintaining physical contact with David. "I was in stasis, waiting for one who could receive my neural signature." "Your touch, it's compatible." "Fascinating." Before David could respond, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. Kreth's grip on his wrist tightened slightly. "More humans approach. Their intentions? They'll want to take you to a secure facility," David explained, suddenly protective. "Standard protocol for, well, we've never actually had a protocol for this specific situation." Kreth's silver eyes seemed to shimmer with amusement. "Your species' first official contact with extraterrestrial life. A significant moment." She paused, her head tilting again. "You're concerned for my safety." "I am," David admitted, surprised by how natural this telepathic conversation felt. "I can't guarantee how they'll treat you." "Then we must ensure this first contact proceeds correctly." Kreth stood gracefully, drawing David up with her. She was tall, nearly matching his 6-foot height. "I will cooperate with your authorities, but I require you to remain as my neural anchor. Without sustained contact, I will revert to stasis. This is non-negotiable." The helicopters were landing now, kicking up clouds of sand. Men in hazmat suits approached cautiously. David made a decision that would change not only his life but the course of human history. "Stay behind me," he said, positioning himself between Kreth and the approaching teams. "I'll make sure they understand the situation." He keyed his radio. "Base, this is Lieutenant Walsh. We have a conscious extraterrestrial visitor requesting diplomatic contact. Be advised, I am maintaining physical contact per her requirements. Any attempt to separate us may result in medical emergency." As the hazmat teams surrounded them and the desert sun began to set, David felt Kreth's gratitude through their linked hands. In that moment, he knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The quarantine facility at Edwards Air Force Base hummed with activity. Through the reinforced glass walls of their designated chamber, David watched scientists and military personnel hurry past, stealing glances at him and Kreth. They'd been here for 3 days, and the only thing growing faster than the stack of NDAs he'd signed was his fascination with his alien companion. "Your species' reliance on verbal communication is inefficient," Kreth observed, her fingers lightly resting on David's forearm. They'd discovered that minimal skin contact was sufficient to maintain their connection. So much meaning lost in translation. David smiled, feeling her genuine curiosity through their link. "Maybe, but there's something to be said for mystery. Having to work to understand each other." Kreth's silver eyes flickered, her equivalent of a laugh. "You appreciate complexity. Most species seek to simplify." She traced one of the iridescent patterns on her arm with her free hand. "These are our memory glyphs. Each represents a significant understanding gained through contact with another consciousness." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Patricia Winters entered, carrying her usual tablet. The neurologist had been assigned to study their connection, and despite her professional demeanor, David could sense her excitement. "Your latest scans are fascinating," she announced, pulling up complex diagrams. "Lieutenant Walsh, your neural patterns have begun to mirror Kreth's in certain areas. It's as if your brain is developing new pathways for processing her bioelectrical signals." "The compatibility is unprecedented," Kreth confirmed. "In our past encounters with other species, establishing even basic neural links required generations of genetic modification. David's natural resonance suggests humanity has untapped potential." David felt a ripple of concern through their connection. "What's wrong?" "There are those among my people who fear such potential," Kreth explained. "The Confluence's policy of gradual uplift of developing species has kept peace for millennia. But your ability to adapt, to forge connections so quickly, it will challenge their assumptions." Dr. Winters looked up sharply. "Are we in danger?" "Not from the Confluence officially. But the purist faction." Kreth's grip tightened slightly. "They believe that only species who develop neural communication naturally should join interstellar society. They consider technological advancement without spiritual evolution to be dangerous." David processed this information, both through her words and the deeper understanding flowing through their touch. "That's why you were alone in that desert. You're not just a scout, you're testing us." "Yes. Official contact missions travel in groups. I volunteered for solo reconnaissance because I believed humanity was ready for more." Her silver eyes met his. "The compatibility we share proves I was right. But it also makes us a target." The facility's lights suddenly flickered. Alarms began blaring. "Security breach in Sector 7, announced a computerized voice. Unknown energy signature detected." Kreth stood, pulling David with her. "They're here already. The purists must have been tracking my ship." Dr. Winters rushed to the door. "I'll alert command," she never finished the sentence. A beam of blue light pierced the glass wall, striking her tablet. Instead of an explosion, there was a silent ripple of energy that left every electronic device in the room dead. "EMP weapons," Kreth explained quickly. They'll disable your technology but leave their own shielded systems functional. Through their contact, David felt her strategizing. We need to reach my emergency beacon. I can signal the Confluence fleet, but it's still in my ship's wreckage. David checked his now useless radio and drew his sidearm. The desert site is 30 miles from here. With the base's systems down. We'll take my transportation. Dr. Winters pulled a key card from her pocket. I have a jeep in the civilian parking area. Old enough to be immune to EMPs. Assuming we can get there. Kreth's patterns flickered with what David now recognized as determination. The purists will be jamming larger vehicles and monitoring escape routes. They expect us to run. She shared an image through their link, maintenance tunnels running beneath the facility. The old bunker system, David realized. It's not on modern schematics. We can use it to reach the parking area undetected. More alarms joined the chorus. The sound of energy weapons and shouting echoed from distant corridors. Through their connection, David sensed Kreth's conflicting emotions, concern for his safety warring with the knowledge that they had to stay together. Whatever happens, she said both aloud and through their link, maintain contact. The purists will try to separate us. Without the neural connection, I'll be vulnerable, and you'll lose the ability to sense their presence. David holstered his weapon and took her hand firmly in his. They'll have to go through me first. The depth of his conviction flowed through their touch, and he felt her surprise at its intensity. Dr. Winters was already prying open the access panel that would lead them to the tunnels. As they prepared to descend into the darkness, David felt Kreth's consciousness brush against his with new purpose. I'm going to share more of my neural patterns with you, she explained. It will be intense. But you'll need my combat training if we're going to survive this. David squeezed her hand in consent. As knowledge and muscle memory from an alien warrior culture flooded his mind, he realized that their connection was becoming something unprecedented, not just communication, but true synthesis. The implications would have to wait. Right now, they had to run. The maintenance tunnels beneath Edwards Air Force Base hadn't seen use since the Cold War. David led the way through the darkness, Kreth's combat knowledge flowing through their joined hands. Dr. Winters followed closely, her phone's flashlight casting long shadows on concrete walls. Through their neural link, David sensed them before he heard them, 3 purist hunters moving silently above. Their bioelectrical signatures felt wrong, artificially amplified and aggressive. Kreth's memories identified their weapons, neural disruptors designed to sever consciousness links and force her kind into stasis. They're hurting us, Kreth whispered both mentally and aloud. The tunnel network has only 3 exits. They're blocking the most obvious routes. A high-pitched whine filled the air. David pulled them behind a support pillar as a section of ceiling exploded inward. 2 figures dropped through the hole, their armor seeming to absorb the darkness. Their helmets were smooth, faceless ovals that reflected the flashlight's beam. Dr. Winters switched off her light, but it was too late. The purists had sensor systems that made conventional stealth useless. David felt Kreth's combat training surge through him as the first attacker raised their weapon. Move like water, the shared knowledge whispered. The neural disruptor's beam passed through the space where they'd been standing as David and Kreth flowed around the pillar in perfect synchronization. His free hand found his pistol, but Kreth's memories warned him it would be useless against their armor. Instead, they moved as one, closing the distance. The purist tried to bring their weapon to bear, but Kreth's hand shot out, touching the attacker's exposed neck seal. There was a crackle of bioelectricity, and the purist collapsed. Their neural shielding only works against ranged attacks, Kreth explained through their link. Direct contact overloads their systems. The second purist was more cautious, keeping their distance. Dr. Winters chose that moment to act, throwing her dead phone at the attacker's helmet. The distraction was minimal, but it gave David and Kreth the opening they needed. Together, they executed a perfect flanking maneuver that ended with another precise strike to a vulnerable neck seal. "The parking area is 200 meters east," Dr. Winters said, already moving. "But they'll have the main exit covered." Kreth shared an image through their connection, maintenance crews installing ventilation systems decades ago. "There's an access shaft that emerges behind the motor pool. Rarely used, likely overlooked." They found the shaft, its rusted ladder barely visible in the gloom. As they climbed, David felt Kreth's consciousness expand, scanning for threats above. The parking area seemed clear, but something felt wrong. "Wait," Kreth commanded as they reached the top. Through their link, David understood immediately. The emptiness above wasn't natural, it was being actively masked. "They're using neural dampers," he realized. "Creating blind spots in your sensing ability." "Smart," Dr. Winters muttered. "How do we get past them?" Kreth's patterns pulsed with sudden inspiration. "David, your natural neural resonance, they won't expect it. Their dampers are calibrated for my species' frequencies." Understanding flowed through their connection. David closed his eyes, focusing on the strange new pathways in his mind. Kreth's touch guided him, showing him how to extend his consciousness like a probe. The damper's blind spots became obvious, not empty, but too perfectly empty. He could sense 4 purists maintaining the field, their positions revealed by the very technology meant to hide them. "I can see them," he whispered. 2 by the emergency exit, 1 behind the generator shed, 1 on the building's roof. Kreth's approval radiated through their link. "Now you understand why the purists fear humanity's potential. Even their most advanced countermeasures can't fully account for your adaptability." Dr. Winters pulled out her key fob. "I can trigger the car alarm. Draw their attention while we make a break for it." "No," David said, Kreth's tactical knowledge merging with his military training. "We use their own strategy against them. They're so focused on masking their presence that they've created a pattern. If we move counter to that pattern." He shared the plan through their neural link, and Kreth immediately understood. Together, they began to generate their own bioelectrical field, but purposefully clumsy, like novices first learning the skill. The purists would detect it, adjust their dampers to compensate. "Now." David pulled them up through the access panel. They ran not away from the purists, but directly between their positions. The dampers, adjusted to mask a stronger field, couldn't react quickly enough to their actual movements. They reached the jeep before the purists realized their mistake. Dr. Winters had the engine running as David and Kreth dove into the back seat. As they peeled out of the parking lot, neural disruptor beams sliced through the space they'd just occupied. "The desert site is 30 minutes away," Dr. Winters said, pushing the jeep to its limits. "Please tell me your emergency beacon will bring help faster than they can follow us." Kreth's grip on David's hand tightened. "The beacon will work, but the purists will have warned their fleet. When the confluence arrives, they'll find 2 different versions of events. Everything will depend on what they sense in our neural link." David felt the weight of worlds settling onto their joined hands. No pressure, then. Through their connection, he felt Kreth's determination, and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. The desert night blurred past as they raced toward a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-alien relations. The Mojave Desert was pitch black except for the jeep's headlights cutting through the darkness. Through their neural link, David felt Kreth's growing tension as they approached the crash site. Her thoughts were a storm of duty, protocol, and unexpected emotions. "Multiple ships entering atmosphere," she announced, her silver eyes fixed on the star-scattered sky. "Confluence vessels. The purists are already transmitting their version of events." Dr. Winters gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What exactly will they tell your people?" "That I've been compromised. That humanity's unexpected neural compatibility is a threat to galactic stability." Kreth's patterns dimmed slightly. They'll demand I sever the link with David and return for rehabilitation. David felt her revulsion at the thought. Through their connection, he saw flashes of other rehabilitated scouts, their memory glyphs dulled, their neural signatures dampened to acceptable frequencies. The jeep crested the final dune. The crash site's crystallized sand glowed under the starlight, but something was wrong. Kreth's ship wasn't there. The purists have moved it, Kreth realized. They're forcing a confrontation on their terms. A massive shadow passed overhead. 3 sleek vessels descended around them, one larger Confluence diplomatic ship flanked by 2 smaller purist crafts. Their designs were organic, almost liquid, with surfaces that rippled like mercury. Dr. Winters stopped the jeep. What now? Before they could answer, a beam of light engulfed them. When it faded, they stood in a vast chamber aboard the Confluence ship. The walls pulsed with bioelectrical patterns that made David's newly awakened senses tingle. 7 figures approached, 4 wearing the traditional flowing robes of Confluence diplomats, 3 in the dark armor of purist zealots. Their neural signatures washed over David like waves, testing, probing, analyzing. Scout Observer Kreth, one of the diplomats, spoke in that same mind-touching way. Explain your violation of contact protocols. Kreth stood straighter, but her grip on David's hand never wavered. Honored Assembly, I submit that no violation has occurred. My mission was to assess humanity's neural potential. The evidence stands before you. Evidence of corruption, a purist countered. This human's neural patterns have been artificially enhanced through prolonged contact. The natural order has been subverted. David felt Kreth's surge of anger through their link. His adaptation was spontaneous. The compatibility is natural, unprecedented. Humanity has achieved in days what other species spent centuries developing. Which is precisely why they are dangerous, another purist declared. Unknown variables threaten the stability of the confluence. The human must be isolated, and you must be cleansed of this contamination. The lead diplomat raised a hand for silence. Kreth, you understand our concerns. Humanity's rapid advancement could destabilize countless carefully managed species introductions. The protocols exist for a reason. Through their connection, David sensed Kreth's moment of crisis. Her duty to the confluence had defined her existence. But their link had shown her something new, humanity's capacity for growth, for connection, for understanding that went beyond mere protocol. The protocols are wrong, she said finally. Every pattern on her skin blazed with conviction. They were created to guide our interactions with developing species, not to limit them. Humanity isn't just capable of joining galactic society, they can help us evolve beyond our own limitations. She turned to David, both speaking and sharing through their link. Show them. Understanding flowed between them. David closed his eyes, reaching out with his newly awakened senses. But instead of scanning for threats, he opened himself to the assembly's neural signatures. He let them feel everything, his wonder at first contact, his growing understanding of their society, his willingness to face danger to protect Kreth, and most importantly, his species' endless capacity to adapt and grow. The chamber fell silent. Even the purists stood motionless, their hostile signatures wavering with uncertainty. Impossible, one diplomat whispered. He's broadcasting on frequencies he shouldn't even be able to perceive. Not impossible, Kreth corrected. Inevitable. This is why I chose to make contact. Humanity doesn't just copy neural patterns, they interpret them, integrate them, improve them. They can help us break free from millennia of stagnation disguised as stability. The lead diplomat stepped forward, neural patterns swirling with intense focus. You realize what you're proposing? To accelerate humanity's introduction into the confluence would violate every precedent. Yes, Kreth answered. And that's exactly why it must be done. Through their joined hands, David felt the weight of the moment. The next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but the future course of human-alien relations. The choice between protocol and progress hung in the balance, and Kreth had just placed everything on humanity's ability to prove themselves ready. The Confluence ship's chamber hummed with bioelectrical energy as the assembly debated. David and Kreth stood united, their neural link radiating a harmony that even the purists couldn't ignore. Dr. Winters watched silently, knowing she was witnessing a moment that would reshape human history. "We have reviewed your neural recordings," the lead diplomat announced. "The evidence of humanity's potential is compelling. But potential alone does not guarantee responsible advancement." "Then test us," David proposed, drawing on Kreth's knowledge of Confluence protocols. "Not just me, establish a pilot program. Let volunteers from both our species work together, learn from each other." Kreth's patterns brightened. Through their link, David felt her pride in his suggestion. A controlled introduction program. Small groups at first, expanding based on demonstrated compatibility. "The risk is too great," a purist protested. "If their neural adaptation spreads. That's what truly frightens you, isn't it?" Kreth interrupted. "Not that humans will fail to adapt, but that they'll succeed too well. That they'll show us new ways of thinking, of connecting, of evolving." The lead diplomat's neural signature pulsed with what David recognized as curiosity. "You propose humans as teachers, not just students." "We propose partnership," David answered, letting his conviction flow through the neural frequencies. "Kreth has shown me your civilization's wonders, but I've shown her something too, that sometimes the most profound connections come from reaching across differences, not enforcing uniformity." Dr. Winters stepped forward. "As a scientist, I can assure you that humanity's greatest advances have come from cultural exchange and diversity of thought. We don't want to replace your ways with ours, we want to learn from each other." The chamber fell silent as the assembly processed their words. David felt Kreth's consciousness brush against his, sharing a moment of perfect understanding. Whatever happened next, they had already proved that their species could connect on the deepest level. Finally, the lead diplomat raised their hands. The chamber's walls rippled with new patterns, not the rigid frequencies of tradition, but complex harmonies that made David's enhanced senses sing. The confluence was founded on the principle of unified growth through controlled expansion, they declared. Perhaps we have become too focused on control, and lost sight of growth." The purists stirred uneasily, but even their neural signatures had softened from hostile static to uncertain wavelengths. "We will establish an exchange program," the diplomat continued. "Kreth will serve as primary liaison, working with Lieutenant Walsh to select and train human candidates. The process will be carefully monitored, but not restricted by outdated protocols." Kreth's patterns erupted in joyous colors. Through their link, David felt her relief and excitement wash over him like a wave. They had done it, created a bridge between their worlds that would benefit both species. "There will be challenges," the diplomat warned. "Many in both our civilizations will resist change. The purists are not alone in their concerns. Change is always challenging," David acknowledged. "But it's also inevitable. Better to guide it than fear it." As if in response to his words, the chamber's walls shifted again. The bioelectrical patterns aligned into new configurations, incorporating frequencies that had never existed in confluence technology before, harmonies born from the unique resonance between human and alien consciousness. "Your neural link will be studied," the diplomat said. "It represents something unprecedented, not just communication, but true synthesis between species. If this can be replicated." "It can't be forced," Kreth interjected. "That's the most important lesson we've learned. The connections have to develop naturally, through trust and understanding." Dr. Winters smiled. "I believe there's an old Earth saying that applies: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink." Through their link, David helped Kreth understand the metaphor. She squeezed his hand, her patterns glowing with amusement and affection. "Then let us begin," the diplomat declared. "Not with grand proclamations or rigid protocols, but with this simple truth: that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from a simple touch, an open mind, and the courage to reach across the stars. As the assembly dispersed and plans were made for humanity's gradual introduction to galactic society, David and Kreth stood together, their joined hands bridging more than just the space between them. In their neural link flowed the future, not just of their own relationship, but of two civilizations learning to grow together, one connection at a time. Dr. Winters watched the alien patterns dance across the chamber walls and smiled. "So," she said, "who wants to help me write the first human-alien cultural exchange handbook?" David and Kreth shared a look, their neural link humming with shared purpose. The real work was just beginning, and they wouldn't have it any other way.